As soon as she stepped onto the 53rd floor to deliver a sushi box, Emily Walker, dressed in a faded windbreaker and peeling sneakers, was immediately stopped by security. "Step outside, this floor is for senior executives," one assistant snapped coldly while others chuckled. "She probably thinks this is a buffet line." When Emily politely said, "I have a direct handoff for Mr. Thompson," the room erupted in laughter. But just then the door swung open and the CEO himself stepped out, saying plainly, "I place the order." "Thank you, Emily." No one knew they had just laughed in the face of a linguistic genius who once turned down a job at the United Nations. Emily stood there, the sushi box still warm in her hands, her brown hair slipping from a loose ponytail. She didn't shrink under their stares. Her face stayed calm, her eyes steady, like she'd heard their kind of cruelty before. The assistant, a wiry guy with a slicked-back ponytail and a suit that screamed money, smirked. "Okay, fine, hand it over," he said, reaching for the box like he was doing her a favor. Emily passed it to him with a small nod, her fingers brushing the crinkled receipt taped to the top. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The way she adjusted her backpack, the faint squeak of her sneakers on the polished marble, said more than any comeback could. The room went quiet for a moment, but it didn't last. "Who does she think she is?" A woman in a pearl necklace muttered, her voice sharp and cold. "Delivering food and acting like she belongs here," another added, her fake smile barely hiding her disdain. A junior executive, his tie slightly crooked and his ego far too large for his frame, leaned over to the security guard and stage whispered, "Check her bag. She's probably here to steal something." The guard, a burly man with a bored expression, stepped closer, his hand hovering near Emily's backpack. "Open it," he said, his voice flat but loud enough for the room to hear. Emily paused, her fingers tightening on the strap for a split second, before she unzipped it slowly, revealing a water bottle, a worn notebook, and a folded map of the city. The executive snorted. "What, planning to navigate your way to a better job?" The room burst into laughter, the sound sharp and unrelenting. Someone else chimed in. "Maybe she's got a resume in there, written in crayon." Emily closed the bag, her movements deliberate, her eyes flicking to the guard for a moment, not with fear, but with a quiet intensity that made him step back. She didn't speak. She just stood there, letting their laughter wash over her like a wave she'd learned to weather long ago. The boardroom door was still ajar, and Emily caught the hum of voices inside, clipped English, a burst of Mandarin, then a tense pause. She shifted her weight, ready to head back to the elevator, when she saw a tall woman in a crimson blazer pacing, her phone pressed to her ear. "Where's the translator? We're losing time." The woman hissed, her voice tight with panic. The Chinese clients, 3 men in tailored suits, sat at the conference table, their faces unreadable, but their fingers drumming impatiently. Emily lingered. Her job was done. She wasn't supposed to stay. But the room felt alive with tension, like a wire about to snap, and something about it held her there just for a moment. As Emily turned to leave, a woman with glossy lipstick and a designer scarf blocked her path, holding a stack of papers. "Since you're here, make yourself useful," she said, shoving the papers into Emily's hands. "Photocopy these. 10 copies double-sided, and don't mess it up." Her tone was condescending, like she was talking to a child. The room snickered and someone muttered, "She'll probably jam the machine." Emily looked at the papers, her fingers steady, and said softly, "I'm just here to deliver food." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Oh, please. You're wasting space. Either do it or get out." The laughter swelled again, and a man in a corner smirked. Maybe she can't even read the instructions. Emily set the papers down on a nearby table, her movements slow and precise, and turned back toward the elevator. The woman scoffed, "Typical. Can't even handle a simple task." The room's mockery followed her each word, a deliberate jab, but Emily's steps didn't falter, her silence louder than their noise. "Hey you," the crimson blazer woman barked, spotting Emily near the door. "You're still here? This isn't a show. Get out." Her words were sharp and a few people snickered. Emily didn't flinch. She looked at the woman, her gaze calm, and said softly, "Would you like help?" I studied Mandarin. The room froze. Then the laughter came louder, crueler. A guy in a pinstripe suit, his cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent lights, leaned back in his chair. "You? Sit down and interpret. What credentials do you have?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The pearl necklace woman chimed in. "She probably just translates takeout menus." The room ate it up. "TikTok is ruining society," another voice added, and the chuckle spread like wildfire. Just as the laughter peaked, one of the Chinese clients tapped his pen on the table, his eyes fixed on Emily. He spoke in rapid Mandarin, not to the room, but directly to her, asking about a specific clause in the contract. The room fell silent, waiting for her to fumble. Emily nodded slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of her backpack, and responded in perfect Mandarin, her voice clear and steady. She didn't just translate, she clarified the clause's implications, referencing a trade regulation from memory. The client's eyebrows rose, and I exchanged a glance with his colleagues, who nodded approvingly. The pinstripe suit guy's smirk faded his cufflinks, no longer flashing with confidence. The crimson blazer woman's phone slipped slightly in her hand, her face paling. Emily finished her eyes meeting the client's for a brief moment before returning to her calm, neutral stance. The room didn't laugh now, it couldn't. Emily stood there, her windbreaker zipped up to her chin, her hands loose at her sides. "I can try," she said, her voice even, like she was offering to hold the door. The crimson blazer woman scoffed, but one of the Chinese clients raised a hand. He spoke quickly, his tone sharp, and the room went quiet again. Mr. Thompson, the CEO, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a no-nonsense stare, stepped forward. "He's asking for an explanation of the contract." Now he said, his eyes scanning the room. The official translator was still missing. Emily took a step closer. "I can do it," she said, not loud, not pushy, just certain. The pinstripe suit guy snorted. "This ought to be good," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Emily ignored him. She walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. The Chinese client started speaking his words fast and precise. Emily listened, her head tilted slightly, her fingers resting on the receipt still in her pocket. Then she spoke. Her Mandarin was flawless, clear, confident, every tone perfect. She translated 3 financial clauses in under a minute, not just repeating the words, but explaining the legal nuances like she'd written the contract herself. The Chinese clients leaned forward, nodding. One of them smiled, a rare crack in his stoic demeanor. A senior manager, his voice oily with false politeness, leaned forward and said, "That's cute, but let's not waste time. You're not qualified to sit here." He gestured to her windbreaker, his lip curling. "Go fetch us some coffee. Black, no sugar." The room erupted in laughter, the sound harsh and unrelenting. Someone else added, "Make it quick or you'll miss your next delivery." Emily's fingers paused on the table, her eyes flicking to the manager for a moment. She didn't speak. She just stood her chair, scraping softly, and walked toward the door. The manager called after her, "Don't forget the cream for mine." The laughter grew louder, each chuckle a deliberate twist of the knife. But as Emily reached the door, she stopped, turned, and looked at him. Not with anger, but with a quiet, piercing calm that made his smirk falter. The room's laughter died just for a second before they tried to recover. The room was silent now, but it wasn't a kind silence. It was the kind that comes when people are too shocked to speak, but too proud to admit they're wrong. "Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "You studied commercial law?" He asked, his voice a mix of surprise and curiosity. Emily shook her head. "No, just languages. I read in my free time." She said it like it was nothing, like she hadn't just saved a $500 million deal from falling apart. The crimson blazer woman stared at her, her phone still clutched in her hand, her mouth half open. The pinstripe suit guy shifted in his seat, his cufflinks suddenly seeming too loud, too shiny. "Before we go any further, can you do something for me?" If Emily's story is hitting you, if you're feeling that sting of being judged, just grab your phone real quick. Hit the like button, drop a comment below, maybe tell me what you think of her strength. And please subscribe to the channel. It means everything to keep sharing stories like this, stories that remind us we're not alone. Okay, let's keep going. The meeting pushed forward, but the air in the room had shifted. Emily stayed at Mr. Thompson's request, but the looks she got weren't grateful. They were sharp suspicious, like she had pulled a trick. The pearl necklace woman leaned over to the guy next to her and whispered, "She probably Googled it ahead of time." The guy nodded, his lips curling into a smirk. Another assistant, a young woman with a tight bun and a clipboard, spoke up. "Do you speak German?" "The third party does," she said, her tone daring Emily to fail. The room chuckled again, softer but no less cruel. "She spoke Chinese now. She wants to act like a genius," someone muttered. As the German client began speaking, the clipboard woman slid a pen and notepad toward Emily, her smile venomous. "Take notes, delivery girl. Maybe you'll learn something." The room snickered, and someone whispered, "She'll probably doodle pizzas." Emily picked up the pen, her fingers steady, and began writing, not notes, but a precise translation of the German client's words, her handwriting neat and swift. When the client paused, Emily slid the notepad back, her translation complete, including a footnote on a legal term's origin. The clipboard woman's smile froze as she read it, her fingers trembling slightly. The German client glanced at the page, her eyes widening, and she murmured something to Mr. Thompson, who nodded slowly. The room's laughter stopped, replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. Emily didn't look at the clipboard woman. She just folded her hands, her windbreaker rustling softly, and waited. A lawyer from the European firm, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent frown, slid a contract segment across the table. It was written in German, with a section in classical Latin, dense, obscure, meant to intimidate. "Go ahead," he said, his voice dry. "Explain it." Emily picked up the paper, her fingers steady. She scanned it for a moment, her eyes moving quickly over the lines. Then she smiled just a little and started speaking. Her German was as smooth as her Mandarin, every word crisp, every phrase clear. When she got to the Latin, she didn't just translate. She explained the root meanings, tying them to historical treaties, like she was teaching a class. "It's from the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, she said, setting the paper down gently. During a brief pause in the meeting, a junior associate, his hair gelled to perfection, pulled out his phone and held it up, pretending to take a selfie, but clearly filming Emily. "Smile, delivery girl. This'll go viral, courier crashes corporate," he said loud enough for the room to hear. The laughter was immediate, cruel and unrestrained. Someone else chimed in, "Tag it epic fail." Emily's eyes flicked to the phone, her expression unchanged, but her fingers tightened briefly on the edge of the table. She didn't speak. She just stood, picked up her backpack, and walked toward the door, her steps measured. As she passed the associate, she paused, looked directly at him, and said softly, "You might want to check your company's media policy." His grin vanished, his phone lowering as the room's laughter turned to awkward coughs. Nobody had expected her to know the policy or to call him out with such quiet precision. The lawyer's frown deepened, but not because she was wrong. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. The German client, a woman with short silver hair and a no-nonsense stare, nodded slowly. "I didn't even know that root," meaning she admitted, her voice quiet. The room was dead silent now. Mr. Thompson looked at his assistant, a nervous guy with a tablet, and said, "Put her on the list of potential advisors." Emily didn't react. She just folded her hands in her lap, her windbreaker rustling faintly. The pearl necklace woman stared at her, her fake smile gone, her fingers twisting the pearls like they might snap. As the meeting wrapped up, a consultant with a loud tie and louder voice handed Emily a business card. Not his own, but a blank one from the table. "Write your name on it, sweetheart," he said, his tone patronizing. "Maybe we'll call you for the next food run." The room laughed the sound sharp and mean. He tossed a pen at her, and it skittered across the table, stopping just short of the edge. Emily picked it up, her movements slow, and wrote her name in clear, deliberate strokes. Then she slid the card back, her eyes meeting his for a moment. "Keep it," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You might need it later." The consultant's laugh caught in his throat, and the room's mockery faltered, unsure of what her words meant, but feeling their weight. Emily stood her backpack over one shoulder and walked out, leaving the card behind like a quiet promise. But the cruelty didn't stop. It never does when people feel small and want to make someone else smaller. A senior employee, a man with a booming voice and a Rolex that caught the light, leaned forward. "If you're that good," he said, his tone mocking, "interpret the gala tonight in 6 languages." He said it like a challenge, like he was daring her to crash and burn. The room lit up with smirks. A delivery girl on stage. "That's rich," the clipboard woman said, laughing. Another voice from a guy in a corner office suit added, "One mistake and the whole deal goes south." They thought she'd back down. They wanted her to. Emily looked at the man with the Rolex, her eyes calm, and said, "I accept." The gala was that evening in a ballroom on the top floor of the Crystal Finance Tower. The room glowed with warm gold light chandeliers, sparkling tables draped in white linen. Emily walked in still in her windbreaker and jeans, her sneakers silent on the carpet. People stared. A woman in a sequined gown whispered to her friend, "Is she lost?" A man with a champagne flute chuckled, "Must be delivering the appetizers." Emily didn't look at them. She walked to the stage where a microphone waited and took her place. The room buzzed with curiosity, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of buzz that comes before a spectacle when people are waiting for someone to fail. Before the speeches began, a tech assistant adjusting the microphone smirked at Emily and said, "Don't trip over the cord, kid. This isn't your delivery route." The crowd nearby laughed, their champagne glasses clinking as they leaned in to watch her squirm. Emily didn't respond. She just stepped forward, tested the microphone with a soft tap, and looked out at the room. Her gaze landed on the assistant for a moment, not with anger, but with a quiet steadiness that made him fumble with his equipment. Then without a word, she began speaking in French, introducing the first speaker with a warmth and clarity that silenced the crowd. The assistant's smirk vanished, his hands frozen on the soundboard as the room's attention shifted to her. She didn't need to say anything else, her voice was enough. The gala began and the speeches started. Representatives from 6 countries, France, Spain, Japan, Russia, Germany, and China stood up one by one, delivering well wishes and toasts. Emily listened, her hands clasped in front of her, her face calm. Then she spoke. Her French was warm, her Spanish fluid, her Japanese precise. She moved through Russian, German, and Chinese without a pause, her voice steady, her translations perfect. Each time she finished a segment, the crowd clapped, but it wasn't just polite applause. It was awe. By the time she delivered the final speech, a 6-language finale that wove every culture together, the room was on its feet. A standing ovation. The chandeliers seemed to glow brighter. Halfway through the gala, a Japanese representative approached Emily during a break, bowing slightly and asking in halting English about a cultural reference she'd woven into her translation. Before she could respond, the man with the Rolex interrupted, his voice loud. "Don't bother her, she's just the help," he said, laughing. The crowd nearby joined in their chuckles, sharp and dismissive. Emily paused, her fingers brushing the edge of her jeans, and then responded in fluent Japanese, explaining the reference with a depth that left the representative beaming. She added a polite bow, her movements graceful, and the Rolex man's laugh died in his throat. The representative shook her hand, ignoring the man entirely, and the crowd's laughter turned to murmurs of surprise. Emily's eyes met the Rolex man's for a split second, her calm unshaken before she turned back to the stage. Mr. Thompson stepped onto the stage, his face beaming. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd, "meet our new communications advisor." Emily smiled just a little, her brown hair catching the spotlight. She didn't bask in it. She didn't need to. The room had changed. The woman in the sequined gown looked away, her champagne flute forgotten. The man with the Rolex stared at his shoes. The pearl necklace woman was gone, left early, someone said later. Emily stepped off the stage, her sneakers quiet, her windbreaker still zipped up. She didn't look back. As Emily left the stage, a French diplomat approached her, his voice low and respectful, asking if she'd ever worked with the United Nations. Before she could answer, the junior associate with the gelled hair snickered from nearby. She's probably never even left the city. The crowd around him laughed their mockery, sharp and biting. Emily paused, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and turned to the diplomat. In flawless French, she explained she'd declined a UN offer to pursue other paths, her tone humble but clear. The diplomat's eyes widened, and he handed her his card, saying, "We need people like you." The associate's phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor as the crowd's laughter turned to stunned silence. Emily tucked the card into her pocket and walked away, her steps steady, her silence deafening. The next day, the consequences started rolling in. The assistant with the slick-back ponytail was fired. Someone found his emails mocking the Chinese clients, and Mr. Thompson didn't hesitate. The pearl necklace woman's company lost a major sponsorship. Her name was tied to a viral post about the gala, and her clients didn't like the optics. The clipboard woman was dropped by her social circle after her delivery girl comment got around. None of it was dramatic. No big scenes, no shouting matches. Just reality catching up, like it always does. Emily didn't say a word about it. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than anything they could have said. A week later, Emily was back at the tower in a small office on the 53rd floor. Not a corner office, nothing flashy, just a desk, a chair, and a window with a view of the city. She was sorting through contracts, her windbreaker draped over the chair. The door opened and a man walked in. Tall, quiet, his suit, simple but sharp. He didn't say much, just nodded at her. "Ready for the next meeting?" he asked. Emily looked up, her eyes steady. "Always," she said. The room felt different when he was there. Nobody mocked her anymore. Nobody dared. Her husband's presence didn't demand respect, it commanded it. They walked out together, Emily's steps steady, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The hallway was quiet, but the whispers followed. Not cruel ones, not anymore. Just questions. "Who is she really?" someone murmured. "How did we miss that? They did a curl," another asked. Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. She'd been judged her whole life by her clothes, her job, her silence. They'd seen what they wanted to see. But now the truth was clear, and it wasn't going anywhere. Emily's past wasn't a story she told, but it shaped her. She'd grown up in a world of wealth, marble staircases, private tutors, her family's name on buildings. But it was a cold world. Her parents' love came with strings, their expectations a cage. She'd walked away choosing a small apartment and a courier job over boardrooms and banquets. The discipline stayed with her in the way she moved, the way she listened. She didn't need their approval. She never had. That day in the boardroom before the gala, there had been a moment nobody noticed. Emily had glanced at a photo on the wall, a black and white shot of the city skyline taken decades ago. It reminded her of a car ride with her father years back when he had pointed out that same skyline and said, "This is ours, Emily. Don't ever forget it." She'd been 16, her hands folded in her lap, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She hadn't wanted it. Not then, not now. But the memory stung, and for a second her fingers tightened on the receipt in her pocket. Then she let it go, her face calm again, her eyes back on the room. The humiliation in that boardroom had been relentless. After her Mandarin translation, the pinstripe suit guy had leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. "Impressive," he said, "but anyone can memorize a few lines." The room tittered, feeding off his smugness. Emily didn't respond. She just looked at him, her gaze steady, until he shifted uncomfortably and looked away. The crimson blazer woman, still clutching her phone, tried to regain control. "Let's move on," she said, her voice sharp. But the Chinese client spoke again, asking for clarification on a clause. Emily answered before anyone could stop her, her Mandarin smooth, her explanation clear. The client nodded, satisfied. The room didn't laugh that time. Later, when the German contract came up, the lawyer with the wire-rimmed glasses had watched her closely, his pen tapping the table. He'd expected her to stumble. When she didn't, when she explained the Latin roots with the ease of a scholar, he had pushed his glasses up and stared at her like he was trying to figure out what she was hiding. Emily didn't meet his gaze. She didn't need to. She set the contract down and folded her hands, her windbreaker rustling softly. The German client, the silver-haired woman, had glanced at her with something like respect. It was small, but it was there. Emily saw it, but she didn't smile. She just waited for the next question. The gala invitation had been the final blow, or so they thought. The man with the Rolex had said it with such confidence, like he was setting a trap she couldn't escape. 6 languages, he'd repeated, his voice booming. "Let's see you handle that." The clipboard woman had laughed, her tight bun bobbing. "She'll choke," she whispered to the person next to her. Emily had stood there, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her sneakers planted firmly on the floor. "I accept," she'd said, and the room had gone quiet, not because they believed her, but because they couldn't wait to watch her fail. That night, as she walked into the ballroom, Emily felt the weight of every stare. The woman in the sequined gown, her lips painted red, leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Who let her in?" The man with the champagne flute raised his glass, his chuckle loud enough to carry. Emily kept walking. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Her steps were steady, her shoulders relaxed. She'd been here before, not in this ballroom, but in rooms like it, where people judged her before she could speak. She'd learned long ago that their words didn't define her. Her actions did. On stage, the microphone felt cold in her hand, but her voice was warm. She listened to each speaker, her eyes focused, her breathing steady. When she translated, she didn't just repeat the words, she brought them to life. Her French was lyrical, her Spanish vibrant, her Japanese precise. The crowd leaned forward, their skepticism fading with every sentence. By the time she reached the Russian segment, the room was hers. The German client, the silver-haired woman, clapped first, her hands steady and deliberate. The Chinese client followed, then the rest of the room. Emily didn't smile. She just nodded a small gesture and moved to the next language. The final speech was the hardest. It wasn't just translation, it was interpretation, weaving 6 cultures into one message of unity. Emily paused for a moment, her fingers tightening on the microphone. She thought of her mother years ago, teaching her French at the kitchen table, her voice soft but firm. "Words are power, Emily," she'd said. "Use them well." Emily had been 10, her hair in braids, her heart full of dreams. The memory flashed and faded, and Emily spoke. Her voice carried clear and strong, every word perfect. When she finished, the room erupted. The standing ovation wasn't just for her skill, it was for her presence, her quiet strength. Mr. Thompson's announcement came like a thunderclap. "Our new communications advisor," he said, and the room shifted. The woman in the sequined gown set her glass down, her face pale. The man with the Rolex stared at the floor, his confidence gone. The pearl necklace woman had slipped out, unable to face the truth. Emily stepped off the stage, her sneakers silent, her windbreaker catching the light. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The room had seen her, really seen her for the first time. The fallout came quickly. The assistant with the slicked-back ponytail was gone by morning, his emails exposed in a company-wide memo. The pearl necklace woman's sponsorship deal collapsed after a viral post quoted her takeout menu's jab. The clipboard woman's friends stopped inviting her to brunches, her reputation tainted by her own words. It wasn't revenge. It was just the world turning, the truth catching up. Emily didn't comment on it. She didn't need to. Her silence was her strength, her dignity, her shield. After the meeting, the silver-haired German client approached her. "You're not what I expected," she said, her voice blunt but not unkind. Emily smiled just a little. "I get that a lot," she said. The woman nodded like she understood more than she let on and walked away. Emily watched her go, her fingers brushing the edge of her backpack. Moments like that small unspoken were why she stayed. Not for the title, not for the office, but for the chance to be seen for who she was, not what she wore. You've been there, haven't you? Judged for no reason, dismissed before you could speak. It hurts. But you're still here. You're still standing. You're not alone. Emily's story isn't just hers, it's yours too. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.